So welcome to the Designed Life. This is our second podcast. We're old hats already, I think. Well, certainly we're more experienced than we were for the last one. So today we're at Roundhouse at their beautiful showroom and joined by Matt Payne of Roundhouse to talk all things kitchens. So kitchens for me are one of the most important elements of any project. It's certainly one of the higher budget items, and I think there are so many considerations when it comes to kitchen design, budget, practicalities. There's so many competing requirements. We need a lot from our kitchens. They probably work harder than a lot of other spaces in
it's
our
the main room in
houses.
the house. If I can interject here a little bit, from a house value point of view, you look at in terms of what a house is worth, you're looking at what I would call the alpha rooms, the A rooms. They're worth far more than the B rooms or the C rooms. So, for example, a cellar is worth much less than the master bedroom or the principal bedroom in the kitchen. The kitchen is the most used room in the house, so therefore it has the highest value. So having the right kitchen in, from my point of view, over to you now.
It's everyone's favourite room.
And
it's everyone's favourite room.
And I bet it sells
the first
the
room
house
everyone looks at.
more than any other room as well.
It's the most important room.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a quote recently, a bit cheesy, but it was, the kitchen has to be a workhorse and a show pony.
So true. I love that. I'm going to use that.
I've used it a few times. Yeah. Some people cringe.
It's
Other people
good. I
love
like it.
So,
So, and I think one of the things that I found over the last however many years, I don't think it's going to go away, is open plan living. That, I think, for all of us, and that sort of translates into gardens as well. You've got a big space that needs to deliver a lot, which connects the inside to the outside. The kitchen has to work in harmony, often with a dining area, a seating area. It's a family space, an entertaining space. So it needs to be the workhorse and the show pony. So how does that change how you design and how you approach the design when it's part of an open plan space?
absolutely. I mean, open plan is really popular. It's been popular for a while. And it can be even trickier to design an open plan space because you don't want it to feel like a big town hall, kind of unfriendly. You need to find a way to try and create zones within there. Yeah.
And how important do you think, and again, I think this brings in your expertise, James, as well, working with clients, assuming that they've got an interior designer on board and a landscape designer, how important is it for you to bring those people in early on? I guess because from my point of view, the kitchen is one of the first things that I'd look at in the context of the overall design, and it's got to work within that entire space aesthetically, but then obviously you've got the practical considerations as well. So is it really important to connect with those other professionals on a project early on?
It's crucial. A lot of clients want to get their ducks in a row, take their time over making decisions. That makes total sense for them. But actually, the flip side is the sooner everyone is aligned and all singing off the same hymn sheet, the more chance you've got of a successful project. I mean, how do you find it when you're sort of introduced quite late on and you've got to try and get to grips with everything?
It's a joy. It's always great always to be involved. I think the key thing is, we spend lots of time in kitchens, and so how does that space link to the rest of the house? And what views can it enjoy into the garden? These are all things to consider. But I'm really interested though from a sort of a design perspective. So you mentioned, especially with open area living, creating spaces for people where people feel like it's the right sort of scale for them in a potentially a big space. So what principles or design process do you use when you're approaching a new kitchen design project? Think, how is this space going to really work for the people who are going to be in it?
No, I mean, actually, a functional kitchen, some people come with sort of wacky, weird, wonderful ideas, but a functional kitchen is always going to take precedent. It has to work, because if it may look fantastic, maybe a work of art, but give it 2-3 years and people will find it a pain to use. If the layout isn't thought out logically with how people are going to use it, I mean, that's assuming that it's a kitchen that will get used, because there are the odd project that comes about that is a show kitchen, a front of house almost kitchen.
And it's a
with
bit of
back
an
kitchen.
American thing, isn't it? It
Yeah.
seems to be coming through more. You've got your display kitchen and then your dirty kitchen, which I guess it's lovely to have that kitchen where you can put all of the, the working items and keep it all out of sight. The reality is that most of us don't have that luxury, even in large houses. So we've got to have that marriage of practicality and beautiful looking kitchen. And
I mean, it differs from designer to designer. I'm typically a modernist, which is that form follows function. It has to work.
yeah.
And then, make it beautiful based off the bones of the kitchen that work, function.
Because the thing is, I think, and again, this is true of any aspect of design, it looks beautiful, but if you come to use it and it doesn't work, that colours how you feel about
The
it.
knife drawers and the different, and you're trying to get the knife, and you could.
Yeah.
Do you know, I had a friend when I was I have a friend. He's still a friend. When I was much younger, in my 20s, and he didn't have a kitchen per se. What he had was 2 dishwashers, and he used to put all his dirty bowls and cutlery and stuff in the empty dishwasher, run the cycle, and then he would eat from the cutlery and plates that came out of the clean dishwasher, and then put them in the other empty one. So rather than having lots of storage, that's what he would do. Of course, he needed an oven and things like that, but the actual kitchen storage was actually almost an irrelevance to him. He was
Wow.
Just in time.
Very efficient.
That's
Just
bachelor living.
yeah, bachelor living.
Yeah.
I think it would only work with a bachelor, but no, it was kind of.
You can get dishwasher drawers now, so you get little sections. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And we're on a sidetrack here, but with a dishwasher drawer, sometimes you can change the height of those, can't you? Because otherwise you can't fit everything in the shelf underneath.
That's the catch. Some of them you can't fit a large dinner plate in, so they're not always perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good option.
So I had a question for you, which involves really all 3 of us, or 4 of us actually, because there are 4 around the table. Insofar as that, a light kitchen is far nicer than an internal dark kitchen, because you do get some kitchens in houses which are like a scullery room, or but the
Natural light, you mean?
natural light
Right.
is what I mean. Yeah, not paint light. I mean that comes later. But to my view, to make the most out of what we all offer, you need a really nice kitchen, some lovely bifold or fully opening doors, which almost are level floor to the patio outside, so that when you open the doors, the outside comes in, that you're looking out into it. And the house I referred to in podcast 1, our introductory one, with the Burntwood house, that actually had an outdoor kitchen, so that you could actually open the windows up from over the units, and use it almost as a hatch, so that you've got the outdoor garden and the outdoor kitchen and the indoor kitchen. Is that something you get involved in? Do you get involved in external kitchens as well?
We do, but typically we'd want to draft someone like James into. The outside.
There's
is
better
not,
people
that's
than
not-
James. I wouldn't want
That's
Of course, there's not.
that's not our speciality. We'd need an expert for the outdoor. But yes, I mean, outdoor kitchens really, really popular, and so we do need to collaborate with other trades and professions to make sure, for example, that the worktop might want to run through. So we have a lot of clients that want to have their indoor kitchen seamlessly blend into the outdoor. So the tiling running through, the cabinetry the same colour and continuing through, and the same with the worktop as well.
Can I
So
just interrupt
Yeah,
there? This is an important design principle for material selection when going from the indoor to the outdoor space. So lots of people like the idea of having that seamless transition from indoor to outside. But the light, even in UK weather, is completely different. And actually, it is almost always, ironically, lighter outside than it is inside. And so the material you select to look in the real world to match will actually be at least a tone darker for the outside material than the inside. And so when I visit clients, they'll have their samples of the interior one, and I say, that's lovely. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm ordering equivalent samples of the same stone, same type of stone, but at least a tone darker, because they will look fundamentally different. And you've also got to bear in mind that inside, unless you're as messy a cooker as I am, the materials are going to stay dry, but a lot of the time our materials are going to be under cloud and wet, and they look then even more different. So there's actually, if you're looking for that sort of complete homogeneous look, it's actually quite difficult to achieve. And I'd be actually encouraging it's like what is complementary rather than what's a direct match.
Because I think the other thing, to your point, absolutely to your point, is that you've got a slip rating that you've got to consider, which is different outside. So you get a slightly rougher finish on your product anyway. And we have this in a project at the moment where, exactly as you were saying, that continuous inside outside from an indoor kitchen to an outdoor kitchen, and that line that will run continuously throughout, and actually using, which was originally what we were looking at, a natural stone outside. You've got to think about how it's going to weather as well. And it won't, a porcelain, whilst it might not have the beauty of a natural product, you know exactly what you're going to get, and it's not going to weather in the same way that a natural stone.
This is why you need people like you guys. You know, I mean,
early on as well. Yeah. Early, but I mean, you asked the question earlier. Yeah. How early do you think it's wise to get appointed?
Never too early.
Never too early. Never too early. Tomorrow, now.
I mean, who would have thought that level of detail actually matters, and the intricacies between outdoor, indoor? Without you three, I buy houses. I don't design them. I'm not good at designing. I'm good at buying, which is why I have people like you, and in my black book, and that knowledge there is invaluable. You know, because that's going to save so much money. Yes, you buy a better kitchen. Yes, you buy a good interior designer and good garden designer, because the savings in terms of longevity and in terms of pleasure far outweigh those costs, assuming you can afford them in the first place, of course. But then you wouldn't be considering these things if you couldn't afford them.
Exactly.
But most people can put together a nice collection of colours, materials, and finishes, and it'll look quite good, pretty good. But those little details, the attention to detail, they're the things that make a kitchen or a space or a garden go from good or even great to wow.
Well, in terms of value, I mean, everybody ultimately looks at their home as an investment. Okay, they buy a house hoping that it's going to go up in price, not down in price, right? So therefore, we consider it an investment. Doesn't matter what people tell you. They no, it's just my home. No, they're hoping it's going to go up in value relative to everything else. That's what they hope. And even if they're not planning on selling it, they're still hoping that will happen. The difference between a good kitchen, in what I term as the alpha room, the A room, at a price per square foot, which seems to be the metric by which we go by, can be phenomenal. We can be talking 20% in value for a kitchen. You know, an average house price. Let's say an average house price is £500 per square foot. That average takes into consideration the cellar, which is worth £100 per square foot, and the kitchen, which is worth £1,000 per square foot, to get to an average of 500. That kitchen difference can be difference between £1,000 and maybe £700 per square foot and £1,500 per square foot, depending how well that kitchen's done. So the real value is actually not only just buying the kitchen, having it designed really well, but also the end value as well. Yeah. Kitchens date, and you can replace them. But if you put the right kitchen in, it can be replaced in a really in a better value way, because you've still got the carcasses all there, and you can have longevity with that. Whereas you get the wrong kitchen, the wrong design, not only have you paid a lot of money for that, but the value of that room has gone from that potential £1,500 per square foot on that room, versus the average of £500, down to £700 because it's dated. You get it right at the outset. You've held your value, and you've paid for that kitchen in terms of longevity and sale.
The other thing, and to your point, is, and I always start by asking clients, and I'm sure you two would do the same, is how long are you going to be in the property? If you're going to even if you're going to be in the property for 10 years, sometimes less, what's the value of that property going to be likely to be when you sell? And you've got to put in an appropriate level for the value of the house. So thinking about the finishes, the material choice, the design, because otherwise, exactly as you said, Jason, you're going to end up devaluing a space in the home which has the potential to provide maximum, or
not necessarily devaluing, but not increasing the value by the potential.
Yes,
using your word. Do you have a typical client? I mean, for your kitchens, do they? Are you putting in lots into penthouse apartments, or is it larger manor houses?
All of the above. All of the above. We get really small flats in Belsize Park to huge houses out in Buckinghamshire and whatnot. Projects down in Penzance, for example.
You really do cover everywhere then.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the beauties, from my perspective, definitely of Roundhouse, is that variety in terms of design. That I know we've worked on a project recently where it was really quite contemporary in a period property, which can work really, really well, all the way through to some of the beautiful cabinetry that you can see in the showroom here, which is much more timeless. So there is that breadth of products and style that you can provide.
What you did brilliantly on that project was take a very contemporary look, but you softened it enough so that it tied in with the period features and it flowed. It was a really contemporary, really current look, but it was still giving a nod to the rest of the
heritage.
Heritage.
How do you do that with a kitchen? Because to my ignorant mind, a kitchen is a kitchen, right? You can choose the worktop, you can choose the colour, you can choose the units. But how do you tone it? What do you do to tone it? And I noticed behind James there, you've got copper taps, for example. Is it that the expression, or is it the tiles, or is it the paint on the walls? What is it that you do between the two of you that blends the kitchen into the period of the house?
Yeah. So with a period house, you're probably looking. You can either use more classic furniture, maybe like a shaker style, or the other way to do it, if you want to do it more subtly, which is what Beck and I did, was using a stained oak. So introducing timber with a bit of colour, because if it's all plain colour, that tends to be a little less soft. It's a bit more harsh and say aggressive as a style, which is great in its setting. But if you want to soften the look, timber's a really great way of doing that.
And I think you've got to think about the context. Going back to the open plan, that particular kitchen was in an open plan space where you had a large living room that flowed into the kitchen, but then the kitchen also flowed into a really lovely dining area and then into the outside space. So thinking about what's happening in the rest of those spaces, bringing in colour choices, finishes, and actually what we did there, which I think worked really well, is providing a contrast, because the kitchen should provide that impact. It's a design statement. So if you choose materials are similar to the flooring or what you've got in joinery in other places, it can get a bit lost and it's a bit bland. So intentionally creating contrast. We had a beautiful eucalyptus veneer, which was stunning, and the worktop was a Patagonia quartzite, which again, and backlit lighting is something else I want to ask about in a minute. But just the finishes there were in such contrast with what was happening in the rest of the space, which was very light and airy. So I think you can intentionally provide that sort of juxtaposition between...
The room had relatively low ceilings, and so actually there was a lot of light coming in, so it was a bright enough room to be able to do it, to go with the smoked eucalyptus, which is quite a dark, it's a deep and moody veneer. But it just created a cosy and moody sort of feeling, which was really good and kind of a little bit different to the rest of the property, which is a nice thing to do, but still tied in. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I ask you a question about, slightly off track here, but I'm interested. Taking marble from, say, Italy has an environmental impact. How do you account for that? For your kitchen, it's going to be coming from all points of the world. Do you, or is there a demand for people who actually environmentally are really concerned about that, and they don't want things being freighted over? They want local materials. Is there a demand for that? Does that exist in kitchens?
Funnily enough, no, not really. Sustainability.
Don't compromise the design.
Yeah. No, sustainability is actually at the forefront of many people's mind. But when it comes to worktops, a locally sourced worktop, maybe reclaim timber occasionally, but generally people, the clients and projects we work on, they're long term. You know, people are coming to us for a kitchen that's going to be 20, 30, 40 years.
Right, recycled worktops. Is that a thing?
Yeah, you can get them. Yeah. They're slightly more few and far between. People tend to go, look, I'm going to take something natural or something. You can have man-made stone, but they just know, safe from the knowledge that this is going to be there for 40 years, and that's my contribution to sustainability,
I think that point's really important about the longevity of the design. So we live in a society where, and we're starting to shift in a better direction, but where ultimately anything we do has a cost to the planet. Realistically, in the grand scheme of things, freighting something by sea isn't actually as bad for the environment as people might think. You could actually be causing a much bigger impact locally if it's sourced from somewhere which have otherwise unsustainable, inefficient practices. And unfortunately, in the UK, most of our quarries have gone out of business because they're not competitive anymore. That's not to say necessarily that stone from abroad is bad for the environment. If it's being designed well and is meant to be lasting 50 years plus, that's probably much better for the environment than something which is a poor quality material, which is going to be out of fashion in 5 years' time, and it's going to be ripped out by the next client, the next owner of the property. That's the consumer churn, which is actually bad for the environment. If everyone came to you and said, I want a kitchen that's going to last 100 years, putting aside fixings and fittings you'll have to update, but where the bones of the kitchen are going to be there in 100 years or 50 years or 200 years, that's a much better sustainability sort of like intent than just, oh, well, this one has a slightly higher carbon footprint to this one, but we're not going to worry about what we do about it next. So that's my sort of take on it.
I get that.
I think I find with my clients the thing that they are most worried about is durability. For worktops, it's got to take a lot. You know, you've got wine that you might spill, or food, or pollen from flowers that you've got on an island. So having something that's not going to stain and not going to scratch. I mean, personally, I love natural materials, and there are some that are better than others. I would really suggest not putting marble in the kitchen because it's so porous. You're never going to want to use anything. But a quartzite is a really good product, and you can get quartzites that have protective finishes on as well to give them that extra level of durability. But something that you're going to be, to your point, James, that you're going to be able to use for years, and it can take life. You've got to be able to live in it.
It's moving away from a kind of fast fashion way of thinking, towards more for the long term, making the right choices for the long term.
I suppose that's where Arga was 100 years ago, with their Argas, which still go 100 years after they were installed, as long as they're maintained. Yeah. They were way ahead of the curve, weren't they? Yeah. Is Arga still is that a product that you recommend still, or are there other products that you compete with?
It's got its place. It's got its place, but they are few and far between. They are very specific projects that are larger manor houses or farm.
You don't see them in apartments, do you?
No.
They're rather hot.
And it's a different way of cooking as well. I think it comes down to the client and how they cook and how much they cook. And like everything, you're going to tailor the appliances as well as the design of the cabinetry and all of those details. The appliances are.
Is there a top range of appliances? Is it Smeg or Miele, or is there a favourite nowadays?
I mean, we work a lot with Gaggenau, Sub-Zero Wolf, Miele, Siemens, Bora. They are kind of the top end.
And are they, like a lot of things, if I was to buy a shirt without a label, it will cost me X. I stick a Ralph Lauren label on it, it's going to cost me X plus 50%. Is that the same with an oven? Is it actually, they perform the same thing and they look the same, it's just one's got Gaggenau written on it and the other one's got Howden's? They do the same function, they have the same durability. What are you paying for in the difference?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you could ask the same of a Lada versus a Rolls-Royce.
Yes.
They both have wheels, seats, steering wheel, and they go from A to B.
Most of the time, anyway.
You don't know you can get a Lada anymore, anyway.
No, a bit of a dated reference here. But so the same is true with appliances. I mean, you're paying for more of a guarantee that they will last longer. Miele, for a while, were guaranteeing for 20 years for appliances. That's incredible. And then it comes down to yeah, I mean, what does the client want? Does the client say, look, my dishwasher needs to wash my dishes, my fridge needs to be cold, my oven needs to get hot, that's it, that's all I care about, then fine, you can look at something a little bit more modest. But you know, if you're looking for people who want to do precision cooking, they're really invested in cooking, they really enjoy it, then you know, a Gaggenau will guarantee by 1 degree the heat of the oven, as an example.
And if people are, everybody has a budget. I mean, there's some people, yes, have no budget, they're budgetless, but there aren't very many of those. Most people have a budget. And what's the first compromise within a kitchen on a budget?
Good question.
It probably is the appliances, because when it comes down to it, it comes back to what you've just asked, what do you really get for it? And then it's easy to defer to, well, look, you know, it heats my food, it keeps my food cold, it washes my dishes. So it is quite easy to then scale back in that area, knowing as well, with certain appliances, they are standard sizes, so swapping them over at some point in the future is...
So you can always just stick a label on the top saying this is Gaggenau.
You could, print off... I mean, they might have something to say about it, but... You know, yeah.
They would never know. Unless you came to sell it as a Gaggenau, then you have a problem. Yeah.
I always suggest the clients invest in cabinetry and worktops. Appliances, I mean, they're easy to swap out. So, lighting.
Ooh, yes.
I mentioned it. It's one of my loves, and lighting everywhere in the house, and the kitchen is exactly the same. It can make or break a space. I mean, good lighting gives you that. I think it adds to that. It was a conversation we had in the last podcast, but it adds to that sense of when you walk into a space, it makes you feel something. It makes you feel. It feels warm and inviting. You feel comfortable. Bad lighting can make you feel really uncomfortable. And I know I've walked into rooms before and thought, I just feel.
And the wrong colour lighting,
happy.
and the
wrong
intensity.
Colour,
Yeah.
the right type of lighting, whether it's the task lighting, ambient, getting your beam angles right for where you're going to be doing any of your prep, the colour of the lighting, the continuity of the colour of the lighting as well. There's just so much to consider. And in a kitchen, it's particularly difficult because it's a task area as well as somewhere that you're going to want to entertain, and you might want, cosy dinners as well as
especially with open plan living.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And invariably people now want some feature lighting as well as all of the other sort of architectural and task lighting. So at what point do you bring the lighting into the kitchen design, and sort of how far do you go with that?
Well, we go so far as to everything that's relating to the cabinetry, absolutely. Everything that's within the room will guide, but generally clients are better off having the right people guiding, an interior designer or a lighting specialist. But we are happy to guide, of course, because it is crucial.
I should imagine audio comes into that as well.
Yeah, of course. In fact, the two things that will make you really enjoy a space, for me, lighting and music can really... You can
and
be
wine.
Yeah, well, wine.
I've been in pretty distinctly kind of average setting restaurants before, but they've got the lighting, the mood lighting and the music bang on, and you really enjoy it. You're having a great time. They've set the tone, and it's all about experience, isn't it? How you enjoy the space, and lighting is crucial.
You can take it as far or not as you want to. The project that we were talking about earlier, we backlit the stone in some areas. I mean, you can take it too far. You don't want to end up with a kitchen that feels like a disco when you've got all your lights everywhere. But I think done to the right level, it really has the ability to create focal points.
Because you need to get the balance right. Task lighting needs to be so that you can see clearly for when you're prepping and cooking. But then being able to have lights on different circuits so that you can separate out and switch task lighting off when the cooking's done, and you use the dining table, and then being able to dim.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Matt. It's
Pleasure.
always, I love talking
me.
about kitchens and all things
It's been really
design.
interesting, yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure.